The emergency room always felt different on Christmas Eve. Some years it was surprisingly quiet, filled with grateful smiles from families eager to return home before the holiday dinner. Other years it became a whirlwind of accidents, heart attacks, and emergencies that reminded everyone life didn't pause for Christmas. Sarah Mitchell had worked enough Christmas shifts to know either outcome was possible. As she tied her dark hair into a neat ponytail and slipped on her hospital badge, she smiled warmly at a younger nurse standing beside her. "Go home," Sarah said. "Your twins are only 5 once. I'll cover your shift." The young nurse's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, you've already worked Thanksgiving." "I know," Sarah replied with a gentle laugh. "Christmas dinner tastes just as good on Christmas morning." The nurse hugged her tightly before rushing out of the staff room. Everyone loved Sarah because she always put others first. She believed kindness had a way of finding its way back to you, at least she used to. Before leaving for work that afternoon, Sarah had spent hours transforming their little home into a Christmas wonderland. The tree sparkled with white lights and handmade ornaments collected during 12 years of marriage. Fresh cookies cooled on the kitchen counter. A roast sat marinating in the refrigerator, ready to be cooked first thing the next morning. She had even wrapped Daniel's gifts herself, a luxury watch he'd admired for months and a leather journal, because he had once told her he wanted to start writing again. Each package wore a small handwritten tag, "To my forever Christmas. Love, Sarah." Daniel had smiled when she kissed him goodbye. "You work too hard," he'd said, pulling her into his arms. "Come home safe. I'll stay up and wait for you." She smiled against his shoulder. "I'll probably get home around 6. We'll open presents together. It's a promise." He kissed her forehead. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Merry Christmas." Those were the last honest words she would hear from him. By 9 o'clock, the emergency department had become overwhelming. An elderly man suffering chest pains, a teenager injured in a car accident, a frightened little girl with a broken arm who refused treatment until Sarah sat beside her and held her hand. Hours slipped away. Sarah barely noticed her phone vibrating inside her locker. Around midnight, she finally stepped into the break room for coffee. 23 unread messages. Most were holiday greetings, one wasn't. It came from her next-door neighbor, Linda. "Linda, Sarah, I don't know if I should tell you this." Sarah frowned. Another message appeared seconds later. A photograph. Her heart stopped. The picture showed Daniel standing in their driveway. Beside him was a beautiful blonde woman wearing a red winter coat and laughing as he carried several wrapped presents into the house. Sarah stared at the image. No, there had to be an explanation. Maybe she was a coworker. Maybe they were organizing a surprise. Maybe before she could finish the thought, another message arrived. "Linda, I'm so sorry. They've been there for almost an hour." Sarah's hands began to shake. She immediately called Daniel. Voicemail again, nothing. Her stomach tightened into painful knots. Just then, another nurse rushed into the break room. "Sarah, Trauma Bay 2. We need you now." She looked once more at the photograph before locking her phone. Patients needed her. No matter what was happening at home, someone else's life depended on her staying focused. She forced herself back into the emergency room. The next 6 hours felt endless. She smiled when patients looked afraid. She comforted crying parents. She helped doctors stabilize a man injured in a highway collision. No one could tell that inside, her own heart felt like it had shattered into 1,000 pieces. Every chance she had, she checked her phone. More messages from Linda. "There are more cars now. They're eating dinner. They're opening gifts." Then came the message that broke whatever hope Sarah still had. A short video. Her finger hesitated before pressing play. Christmas music echoed through her living room. The tree she had decorated stood glowing in the corner. Friends laughed around the dining table. Daniel wrapped one arm around the blonde woman. She sat in Sarah's chair. The chair where Sarah always drank hot chocolate on Christmas Eve. Daniel leaned over, then he kissed the woman. Not a polite greeting, not a misunderstanding. A slow, familiar kiss that belonged to a husband, but not to his wife. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. For several seconds she simply stared at the frozen screen. A doctor touched her shoulder. "You okay?" She blinked quickly and forced a smile. "Just tired." He nodded sympathetically. "We're almost through the night." If only he knew. The sun was beginning to rise when Sarah finally clocked out. Snow drifted gently onto the empty streets as she drove home. She rehearsed 100 different confrontations in her mind. She imagined screaming, throwing gifts, demanding answers. Instead, silence greeted her. Several unfamiliar cars remained parked outside. Empty wine bottles sat near the trash bins. Wrapping paper had blown across the yard. The Christmas wreath she had carefully hung the day before now leaned crookedly against the front door. Sarah unlocked the house with trembling hands. The scent of expensive perfume hit her before she even stepped inside. The living room looked nothing like the cozy space she had left behind. Half-empty glasses covered the coffee table. Cookie crumbs littered the rug she had vacuumed only yesterday. The ornaments she treasured had been carelessly knocked from the tree, several lying broken beneath the branches. On the sofa rested a woman's bright red scarf. Near the fireplace stood 2 champagne glasses. One still carried a smear of crimson lipstick. Sarah slowly walked through the room, taking in every painful detail. This had been her home, her safe place. Her Christmas, now it felt like she had wandered into the life of strangers. She quietly climbed the stairs. The bedroom door was slightly open. From inside came the sound of peaceful breathing. Sarah looked through the narrow gap. Daniel lay asleep in the bed they had shared for 12 years. Curled against him was the same woman from Linda's photograph. Sarah didn't cry, not anymore. The tears had dried somewhere between the emergency room and her front door. Instead, a strange calm settled over her. She quietly closed the bedroom door without making a sound. Walking into the guest room, she retrieved a small suitcase and packed only what truly belonged to her: her clothes, family photographs, nursing certificates, passport, and the framed picture of her late mother. Before leaving, she removed the gift tag from Daniel's unopened Christmas present. On the back, she wrote just 4 words: "Enjoy what's left. Goodbye." She placed the tag on top of the box, picked up her suitcase, and walked out of the house without looking back. As snowflakes fell softly around her, Sarah realized something profound. Christmas hadn't ended, her marriage had. And somewhere beyond the heartbreak, a new beginning was quietly waiting for her. Sarah spent her first night after leaving the house in a small hotel just 15 minutes from the hospital. She barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the image of Daniel laughing beside another woman in front of the Christmas tree she had decorated with so much love. By morning, she had made one decision. She would never go back, not for an apology, not for excuses, not even for the 12 years they had shared. Some betrayals didn't leave cracks. They reduced everything to ashes. The day after Christmas, Sarah rented a modest one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't glamorous. The kitchen was tiny, the furniture was secondhand, and the windows overlooked a crowded parking lot instead of the quiet neighborhood she once loved. But when she locked the door that evening, something surprised her. For the first time in months, she felt safe. There were no lies waiting behind the front door, no pretending, no wondering where Daniel had been or why he suddenly worked late so often. The silence hurt, but it was honest. An honest silence was better than a house filled with deception. Daniel began calling almost immediately. His name flashed across her phone again and again. 20 missed calls. 30, 2 text messages, then came the voicemails. "Sarah, please answer. It isn't what you think. We need to talk. I made a mistake. I was going to tell you." Each message sounded more desperate than the last. Sarah listened to only one. Then she deleted the rest without replying. She had spent 12 years believing his words. Now she chose to believe his actions instead. A week later, she met her closest friend and fellow nurse, Emily, for coffee. Emily looked heartbroken the moment she saw Sarah. "I wanted to tell you," Emily admitted quietly, "but I didn't know if the rumors were true." Sarah looked up. "What rumors?" Emily hesitated. "Daniel has been seen around town with that woman for months." Sarah's cup froze halfway to her lips. "What?" Emily sighed heavily. "I thought maybe you knew. They were having dinner together, shopping together, even at charity events." Sarah stared silently through the cafe window. Months, while she had been working double shifts, while she had been saving money, while she had been planning their future. He had been building another life. That evening, Sarah began sorting through old financial records. At first, she simply wanted to understand where everything had gone wrong. Instead, she discovered something alarming. Their joint savings account held far less money than she expected. Thousands of dollars had disappeared over the previous year. Large withdrawals, luxury hotel charges, jewelry stores, vacation bookings she had never taken, restaurant bills from nights Daniel claimed he had been working overtime. Each statement felt like another betrayal. She wasn't just mourning her marriage, she had unknowingly financed its destruction. The following Monday, Sarah scheduled a consultation with one of the city's most respected divorce attorneys, Margaret Collins. Margaret listened carefully without interrupting. When Sarah finished, the attorney folded her hands. "I know this feels overwhelming," she said gently, "but let me ask you one question." Sarah nodded. "Did your husband ever ask your permission before transferring money from your joint accounts?" "No." "Did he disclose these purchases?" "No." Margaret leaned back. "Then this isn't simply infidelity." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "This may also involve financial misconduct." For the first time since Christmas Eve, Sarah felt something besides grief. Hope, quiet, determined hope. Meanwhile, life at the hospital continued. Patients still needed her. Children still cried. Families still waited anxiously outside operating rooms. Sarah threw herself into every shift. Her coworkers noticed the sadness behind her smile, but they also noticed something else. She never stopped caring. One snowy evening, an ambulance rushed in carrying an 8-year-old boy trapped earlier in a highway collision. His condition deteriorated within minutes. Doctors worked frantically, machines beeped, parents sobbed outside. Sarah refused to leave the child's side. For nearly 2 hours she assisted the trauma team, comforting the frightened boy whenever he opened his eyes. "You stay with me," she whispered gently, squeezing his small hand. "We're not giving up on you." Against overwhelming odds, the child survived. His parents hugged every member of the medical team. When they reached Sarah, his mother broke into tears. "You saved my son's life." Sarah shook her head. "We all did." But deep inside, those words reminded her of something important. Even after someone had shattered her heart, she still had the ability to heal others. Daniel had stolen her trust. He hadn't stolen her purpose. A month later, the hospital administrator called Sarah into his office. She assumed she had forgotten paperwork. Instead, he smiled warmly. "We've been watching your work for years." Sarah looked confused. "You've become one of the strongest leaders in this department." He slid an envelope across the desk. Inside was an offer for a promotion to clinical operations supervisor, along with a significant salary increase and expanded leadership responsibilities. Sarah looked up, speechless. "I wasn't expecting this. You earned it." he replied, "especially after everything you've handled recently. You never stopped showing up for your patients." Tears gathered in her eyes, not tears of heartbreak, tears of relief. Someone had finally seen her worth. That evening, Sarah returned to her apartment carrying a small potted poinsettia she had bought on the way home. She placed it near the window, made herself a cup of tea, and looked around the little apartment. It still wasn't the home she had dreamed of, but it was becoming a place where new dreams could grow. Her phone buzzed once more. Another message from Daniel. "Please, I lost everything. Can we just talk?" Sarah stared at the screen for several seconds. Then she quietly blocked his number. She wasn't doing it out of anger. She was doing it because healing required boundaries. Outside, fresh snow began covering the streets once again. Sarah watched it fall, realizing that winter had a way of hiding yesterday's footprints. Perhaps life did too. She smiled softly to herself. For the first time since that devastating Christmas Eve, she wasn't thinking about revenge. She was thinking about the future, and somewhere across town, Daniel still believed he had time to fix what he had broken. He had no idea that Sarah had already taken the first steps toward a future where he no longer had a place, and that the sweetest revenge was only just beginning. 3 months passed before the divorce proceedings officially began. By then, Sarah Mitchell was no longer the broken woman who had quietly walked out of her home on Christmas morning with a single suitcase. The sleepless nights had become less frequent. The constant ache in her chest had slowly faded, replaced by something much stronger. Clarity. She no longer wondered why Daniel had betrayed her. Some questions no longer deserved answers. Instead, she focused on preparing for the future. Every evening after work, Sarah met with Margaret Collins, her attorney. Together, they reviewed years of financial records, tax returns, bank statements, credit card bills, and property documents. At first, Sarah assumed Daniel had simply spent money on expensive dinners and gifts for his mistress. The truth was far worse. Margaret placed several folders across the conference table. "You're going to want to see this." Sarah opened the first folder. Inside were copies of bank transfers she had never authorized. Large sums of money had quietly disappeared from their joint savings over nearly 2 years. Another folder revealed luxury vacations. A third contained receipts for designer handbags, jewelry, expensive hotels, and furniture deliveries. None of them had been for Sarah. Margaret looked directly into her eyes. Daniel didn't just have an affair. She slid one final document toward her. He used marital assets to finance that affair. Sarah stared silently at the pages, thousands of dollars. Money they had saved for a larger home. Money meant for retirement. Money she had earned by working countless overnight hospital shifts while missing birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays. Every exhausting shift she had worked had helped pay for another woman's luxury lifestyle. For a brief moment, anger threatened to consume her. Then she slowly closed the folder. "No," she whispered. Margaret frowned. "No. I'm not going to let this turn me into someone I don't recognize." Margaret smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Across town, Daniel's life was beginning to crumble. The excitement of his affair had disappeared. His mistress, Vanessa, had expected a wealthy man who would soon finalize an easy divorce and provide the glamorous future he had promised. Instead, she found mounting legal bills, frozen accounts, endless meetings with lawyers, creditors calling daily. Daniel became increasingly desperate. One afternoon, he appeared unexpectedly outside the hospital. Sarah had just finished a 12-hour shift when she saw him standing beside her car holding a bouquet of white roses. He looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. His expensive suits had been replaced by wrinkled shirts and an old winter coat. When he saw Sarah, his face brightened. "Sarah," she stopped several feet away. "What are you doing here? I've been trying to reach you. I know. I just need 5 minutes." She glanced at the flowers. "I don't." His shoulders slumped. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." She remained silent. "I was selfish," he admitted. "I don't even recognize the person I've become." Sarah looked at him calmly. "I recognized him on Christmas morning." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Daniel lowered his head. "I never meant to hurt you. You didn't mean to get caught." He had no response. For nearly a minute, neither of them spoke. Finally, Sarah stepped around him. "I hope one day you become the man you pretended to be." Then she unlocked her car and drove away. She never looked back. The divorce hearing arrived in early summer. The courtroom was quiet. Daniel sat beside his attorney. Vanessa occupied the second row, dressed elegantly and wearing an expression of complete confidence. She still believed Daniel would walk away wealthy. Sarah entered wearing a simple navy blue suit, no dramatic makeup. No attempt to impress anyone, only quiet confidence. Margaret organized several thick binders before the hearing began. Daniel glanced toward Sarah. She didn't acknowledge him. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The proceedings began routinely. Then Margaret requested permission to present financial evidence. For nearly 2 hours, she carefully walked through every document. Bank transfers, hidden accounts, credit card statements, property records, unauthorized withdrawals. Receipts connecting Daniel directly to purchases made for Vanessa. Each exhibit painted the same picture. Daniel had secretly used marital funds to support his affair while deceiving his wife. The courtroom became unusually quiet. Even Daniel's attorney appeared increasingly uncomfortable. Then Margaret introduced the final piece of evidence, a series of emails. Daniel had attempted to hide assets by transferring money into an account opened under a shell business shortly before filing for divorce. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Mitchell," his voice carried across the silent courtroom, "did you disclose these assets in your financial declaration?" Daniel swallowed hard. "No, Your Honor." "Did you intentionally omit them?" A long silence followed. Finally, "Yes." Gasps echoed throughout the room. Vanessa's confident smile disappeared instantly. She turned slowly toward Daniel. "You told me everything was legal." Daniel couldn't meet her eyes. "I can explain." She stood abruptly. "No, you've been lying to me too." Without another word, she walked out of the courtroom. She never returned. Daniel watched helplessly as the courtroom doors closed behind her. In that single moment, he lost the woman for whom he had destroyed his marriage. The judge's decision came later that afternoon. Because Daniel had concealed assets and violated his financial disclosure obligations, the court ruled heavily in Sarah's favor. She received a significantly larger share of the marital estate, reimbursement for misused joint funds, and sole ownership of several investments Daniel had tried to hide. It wasn't a victory built on revenge. It was justice built on truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters approached both parties after learning about the unusual financial misconduct case. Daniel lowered his head and hurried toward his car without answering questions. Sarah simply smiled politely and declined to comment. She had no interest in humiliating him publicly. His own choices had already done that. A week later, Sarah received the final paperwork confirming the divorce. She placed the documents inside a drawer and quietly closed it. 12 years of marriage had officially ended. She expected to feel sadness. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Freedom. That evening, Emily invited her to dinner. As they laughed over homemade pasta, Emily raised a glass. To new beginnings, Sarah smiled no. Emily looked confused. Sarah lifted her own glass to knowing our worth. They clinked glasses together. For the first time in years, Sarah realized she no longer measured her value by whether someone chose to love her. She measured it by the life she had built, the people she had helped, and the strength she had found within herself. Meanwhile, Daniel sat alone in the house that no longer felt like a home. The Christmas lights were gone. The laughter was gone. Vanessa was gone. The marriage he had taken for granted was gone. For the first time, he understood a painful truth. He hadn't lost Sarah on Christmas Eve. He had lost her the moment he chose betrayal over loyalty. And unlike the gifts he had once placed beneath the Christmas tree, some things once broken could never be wrapped up and returned. The first snowfall of December arrived almost exactly 1 year after Sarah had walked away from the life she once believed would last forever. As she stood beside the large windows of St. Anne's Medical Center, watching delicate snowflakes drift across the parking lot, she couldn't help but smile. Last Christmas, she had walked into the hospital carrying a heart full of love. She had walked out carrying only heartbreak. This Christmas, everything was different, not because the pain had disappeared, but because she had grown beyond it. Much had changed over the past 12 months. Sarah had flourished in her new role as clinical operations supervisor. Under her leadership, the emergency department became one of the high-stressed trauma units in the state. Younger nurses admired her calm leadership, while doctors respected her unwavering professionalism. She had also become something of a mentor. Whenever a new nurse struggled through a difficult shift, Sarah was always the first to offer encouragement. "You can't save everyone," she often said, "but you can always give them your best." Those words reflected her own journey. She couldn't save her marriage, but she had saved herself. Her little apartment was gone too. Earlier that autumn, Sarah had used the divorce settlement and years of careful savings to purchase a charming two-story cottage on the edge of town. It wasn't as large as the house she had once shared with Daniel, but every room reflected her personality. Warm cream, colored walls, bookshelves filled with novels, fresh flowers on the dining table, family photographs lining the hallway. Most importantly, every memory inside those walls belonged to peace rather than betrayal. This Christmas Eve, instead of mourning what she had lost, Sarah opened her home to people who had become her chosen family. Emily arrived first carrying homemade apple pie. Several nurses followed with casseroles and desserts. 2 doctors brought gifts for everyone's children. The parents of the little boy Sarah had helped save months earlier surprised her with a framed photograph of their son smiling beside his bicycle. At the bottom of the frame were simple words, "Because of you, this smile still exists." Sarah's eyes filled with grateful tears. No expensive jewelry Daniel had ever bought could compare to that gift. Laughter filled every corner of the house. Christmas music played softly in the background. Children raced around the living room searching for candy canes hidden among the decorations. For the first time in many years, Sarah realized she wasn't pretending to be happy. She truly was. Around 7 that evening, the doorbell rang. Emily glanced toward the entrance. "Were you expecting anyone?" Sarah shook her head. "I don't think so." She opened the front door. Standing beneath the porch light was Daniel. Snow rested across his shoulders. He looked older than 40 now. His confident posture had disappeared. The expensive watch he once wore was gone. In one hand, he held a bouquet of white lilies. In the other, a neatly wrapped Christmas gift. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Merry Christmas," Sarah answered politely. "Merry Christmas." He looked past her shoulder. The sounds of laughter drifted from inside. "You look happy." "I am." His eyes lowered. "I've rehearsed this conversation for months." She waited patiently. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "No." Sarah replied honestly. "I don't." He nodded. "I ruined everything." "Yes." "I thought what I wanted would make me happy." Sarah remained silent. "It didn't." He took a deep breath. "Vanessa left a week after the divorce." "I know. I lost my job." Sarah had heard that too. The company couldn't trust someone who had lied during legal proceedings. Daniel's voice cracked. "I've spent every day wishing I could go back." Sarah looked at the man she had once loved more than anyone. Oddly enough, she felt no anger, only compassion mixed with distance. like remembering a chapter from a book she had already finished reading. "I came to apologize," Daniel said quietly, "not because I expect another chance." He extended the small gift toward her. "I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I destroyed." Sarah looked at the present but made no move to accept it. Instead, she gently pushed it back toward him. "I don't need gifts anymore." He lowered his hand. "I know." She smiled softly. "You once asked me why I always volunteered to work Christmas Eve." Daniel nodded. "I remember. I told you it was because helping people made me feel rich." She paused. "I didn't realize how true that really was." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I was too blind to appreciate you," Sarah answered gently. Maybe. Another silence settled between them. Finally, Daniel whispered, "Can you ever forgive me?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I already have." His eyes widened. "You have." "I forgave you months ago." Hope briefly appeared across his face. Then Sarah continued, "I forgave you because carrying hatred was hurting me more than it was hurting you." She stepped slightly closer. "But forgiveness isn't the same as giving someone another chance." The hope disappeared. "I understand. You taught me something valuable." Daniel frowned. "What?" Sarah smiled warmly. "You taught me never to build my happiness on another person's promises." A tear rolled down his cheek. "I'm sorry, I know." She looked toward the joyful voices inside her home. "My life is full now. I can see that. And it isn't missing anything." Daniel nodded slowly. "I guess this is goodbye." Sarah looked at him one last time. "Last Christmas, you gave your love to someone else." She placed one hand gently over her heart. "This Christmas, I finally gave mine back to myself." Neither of them spoke again. Daniel quietly turned and walked down the snow-covered path. He never looked back. Sarah closed the front door. Emily walked over. "You okay?" Sarah smiled brighter than ever. "I've never been better." She returned to the dining room, where friends welcomed her with warm smiles and cheerful laughter. As everyone gathered around the table, Sarah looked at the people surrounding her. Some were family by blood. Others had become family by choice. All of them loved her honestly. Before dinner, Emily raised a glass. "To Sarah." Everyone smiled. "To Sarah." Sarah laughed, shaking her head. "No." She lifted her own glass. "To second chances." Everyone echoed the toast. Outside, snow continued falling softly beneath the glow of the Christmas lights. Inside, warmth, kindness, and genuine love filled every room. Sarah finally understood something she had spent an entire year learning. The sweetest revenge had never been watching Daniel lose everything. It had been refusing to lose herself. The woman who had driven away alone on Christmas morning with nothing but a suitcase had become someone stronger, wiser, and happier than she had ever imagined. And as she looked around the table at the family she had chosen and the life she had rebuilt with courage, she realized the greatest Christmas gift had never been found beneath a tree. It had been the quiet strength to walk away from betrayal, heal with dignity, and open her heart to hope once again. Sometimes the happiest endings don't begin with revenge. They begin the moment you choose yourself.